There's still at that time one more round that has to go, and then the fingerprint clearance has to come with that. So there has to be a background check clearance and the fingerprint clearance both come across before any person can be going to the field. Also, this is being reinforced in that we've cut down the times, so we're not doing it. We're doing our sign-ins for people on Tuesdays. So we'll be running them through the process on Tuesdays to ensure that we're not doing this day to day, and so nothing slips through the cracks. The board was very clear that they wanted nothing to slip through the cracks, so we put policies and procedures in place to make sure that none of this does not slip through the cracks, and that all people are vetted before going to work in the field.
Okay, Ms. Cronenberg had a question, because I still want to stay with this issue because I want to talk process, but go ahead, Ms. Cronenberg.
So the one question I have, Mr. Whittemore, is back to Mr. Ramsey's reference to substitutes. So if I'm in the district substitute pool, I would go through this check when I enter the pool, and then I could be working very intermittently, right?
Correct.
How often would I go through the check? Would it be a one-time check? If I'm gone for 6 months and then I'm called back up as a sub, I mean, what's the process for subs?
So if you're not subbing enough in the district to earn, if you don't make enough earnings, you're called that we turn you out. And so if you're turned out of the system by not working enough, and that's a great question, you'd have to go back through the process to be reemployed, because we turn you out.
So there's some number of hours or days?
Correct. So if you don't work more than 20 days in a semester, for example, we would make a call, and then they are turned out. And you would see that go through the system. And then the other thing I want to point out to you is your question is understand, no matter the sub, whether the sub is certificated, it's covered in the background checks that you have before you. Because a substitute teacher is a certificated employee. So they are covered under the board policy of certificated employees 4111. If they are a classified substitute, they are handled under the substitute, or they're handled under the classified board policy. So where you call them subs, in the board policy will classify them as either classified or certificated. Or in the occasions we have substitute managers, they will be vetted through the same way.
And do they all have the same termed out?
Yes.
So no matter whether I'm certificated or management for that matter?
That's correct.
So if I'm gone if I don't meet the number of hours and the number of days, the check would be restarted?
Correct.
Okay.
And one other point I might want to add to that goes with that, with the fingerprint checks, also with people too, so if there's anything that's an automatic, so anybody that in the system, so there's this other check and balance, so anybody that's fingerprinted, if something comes up, we get it the next day. So if I'm fingerprinted tonight for something, the school district would get that fingerprint the next day.
And do we get that for our subs as well? We get that for
yes,
everybody?
Anybody that's signed on our rolls, we get that.
But if they term out, do we get that?
No, we don't, but we re-sign them up.
We're going to re-sign them up.
Right, then they'd have to go through that fingerprint check.
Because this is an important discussion.
Yeah, actually, being one of probably the few people in the room way back that was a substitute teacher, what I'm looking at here are improvements. The question that I would have is, how are we informing everyone in our system that this person may not be on the list anymore? Do we get lists out on a timely basis to the sites, which is where this kind of stems from?
And that's a good question, because what is going to happen process-wise to ensure that that's done? We're a big district, and people have to be on top of this every single day.
That's very important. And when somebody's turned out, they're taken out of the system. So the subsystem would not allow. What we would do is we would take them out of the system, and then the sites do not have access to them. So the subsystem itself, you would go into the subsystem and remove them from there.
Fine.
Right.
So if I'm, as a teacher, and normally when I'm gone or I'm doing something, have a specific go-to sub. If my go-to sub doesn't have his or her number of hours in to not be termed out, that person is going to have to reapply. They're going to have to, do they get notified?
They get notified, yes. We notify them. And there's times where we notify people that we're going to turn you out. They say, oh, no, I've been out of the country, I've been on vacation, please don't turn me out, I want to be back in the system, I want to stay in the system. So we don't just say, oh, you're done. We notify people because we do have, for example, we have many retirees that like to sub for us.
That's another good point. I forgot about that. Retirees.
Retirees will sub for us. And what they will do is, I only sub for this teacher, this teacher, this teacher, or I only want to sub at this school. And so they may not sub for a semester, but we know those people and we work with them and we stay in contact. Yes, we want to stay on the list. And on the good side of that, some substitutes that we have a good relationships with our substitutes, that if they leave for a period of time, they make us aware. Because, hey, I want to stay on the list, but I'm going to be doing this for a short period of time.
And then they wouldn't turn out.
We don't turn them out.
Okay, but we're still not where I need to be with this, because I'm trying to visualize this and see what happens. Is there a checklist? Say, for example, you start a process, oh, it's the end of the day, I didn't get done with it. Somebody else picks up the file. Is it a uniform, to have a uniform document now that we can identify that looks similar for every single person going through this process? And if it is, can you get the board a copy of it? Because I just want to know exactly when we can then go, when you go look at a file, it's all been done. You can point to, you were supposed to, because there's got to be accountability.
With each new hire, and I can put in the Friday memo, there's a sheet that goes through every person. It's a checkoff sheet, just that you asked for.
Okay, but I want the checkoff sheet to look by the superintendent and updated. And I don't know if you have a chance yet, Dr. Arbor. I'm not saying you have to do it tonight, but I really want to see some uniformity here. And it's important that we have a consistent, uniform process so that no matter who comes in and picks up this file, they know the same set of practices and protocols must be complied with. And they have to be trained to know that there is no wiggle room on this document.
And they've been duly trained on that document, and I will get you a copy. There's a document. And it's a great point that you bring up. What your desire to have happen is what's been created. It's a checkoff document that I can take. Any one of you can pick it up the next day after Ken has worked on it. The next day you can work on it. You can pick up right from where you can say, oh, this hasn't been checked off, and it goes right in line. It will say right on there, background check, done, boom. Fingerprints, done, boom. And so it goes right down.
Referral, reference checks, done, boom.
Done.
The date that phone call was made, done, boom. By who, done. What time, what date. All those, that has to be on there so that they have a date, a time, and who they phoned, and who they spoke to. I wanted them to ask that. I spoke to X because someone said, I didn't say that. Or I wanted to be very, very clear about who, time, date, what, where, and when. That way, there's no ambiguity in terms of the process, because there's some ambiguity. Because I'm not sort of finished. I want to get to the whole camp epic document thing. How that, what do we can do around that? But Todd, do you have any questions on this right now? Especially since we haven't even talked about volunteers yet.
I do have a question. So, if we had an employee who resigned under the cloud of investigation, what would consequences? What would we do as a certificated employee? Would we report it to the California Teacher Credentialing Agency?
There are strict rules and guidelines depending on how somebody leaves the district and the reporting processes in the state of California.
Well, I heard those are all new that just came into account in 2014. What I heard, there's different requirements in terms of notifying. I'm not a teacher. What's it called in the state?
CTC.
Yeah, what's the new law? If somebody gets fired, are we going to follow up with what's it called?
CTC. We have to follow up. There is, so if somebody leaves and they leave under a cloud, or there's anybody that's like, if I put somebody out even today, if you put somebody out on 10 days of unpaid leave, you have to report that. So anybody that's suspended in any way, shape, or form from the district, you have to report that to CTC. And if not, CTC will find out and you get a nasty grant from them. So we are very diligent in making sure we report to CTC any and all issues that come forward.
Are charter schools obliged to follow the same process?
What's that?
That's a great question.
Would you know whether charter schools are obliged to follow that same process?
Well, anybody that has credentialed people in their sites are obliged to follow those processes.
Okay, but Mr. Grossman, that doesn't answer the question. And that's a great point, because we approve in some charter schools we supervise. We didn't do making waves there by the county, but Richmond College Prep,